Lizzie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into your story. We got connected by a mutual friend, and he told me about your story, and I was like, wow, like I think I need to have this conversation, right? You have such a remarkable story about overcoming and escaping where you were to build a life that you have now. But where I want to, and we'll get into it, right? Like little teaser, it's going to get crazy. But with that being said, who are you today? And then we'll break down how you got there.
Lizzie Ends. I live in Arizona, board certified functional nutrition practitioner. I specialize in women's hormones. So I help people get more energy, get better sleep so their body can function at its best.
Yeah. So what pulled you into nutrition? Like, why were you like, hey, I want to help women through this process?
I have my own experience of hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, and that was after I was in the field of personal training and holistic health, and I was already doing some coaching. But my background, and I come from like fat diets and jumping from diet to diet that caused a wide array of health issues that I didn't know that I was causing. And that's what led me then into studying functional nutrition and the hormones and then diving into that, which is my all-time favorite.
Yeah, very cool. And obviously, you've been able to kind of do the research for yourself to be able to overcome those things, right? Now, I imagine when you're talking about these autoimmune diseases and everything else in between, it's a forever battle, right? Like, I don't. Is there a cure for these things? Is it something that you work with your clients every single day and try and figure it out? What's that look like?
Absolutely. There are cures. You can heal from them. One thing to remember with autoimmune is a lot of it is stemmed back to trauma as well. So, what I always ask my clients is, what was your childhood like? Did you have any trauma in your childhood? Because most autoimmune stem from the gut, and our gut is our second brain, and it's where our nervous system sits. And 95% of our serotonin lives in our gut, and our dopamine is in our gut, and those are our happy hormones. And so, if our nervous system is a wreck from trauma, then the gut is going to be affected as well. And then that's kind of a downward train of like all these other things that are happening. So healing the gut is key number one if you want to heal the rest of your body. And it's possible. You can get cured. It can take a long time, but trauma is one of those things that has to be addressed as well.
Yeah, let's talk about trauma for a minute. I think trauma is something that a majority of the world goes through. But I think when we share certain stories, and we'll get into your story, or when I share my story, people are like, oh, well, my life wasn't that bad comparatively.
Yeah.
There's an interesting study done that they did a study. They took two boys, right? A boy from the inner city who watched his mom get shot right in front of him, and a boy in a well-to-do area who got bullied. And they scanned their brain, and the damage that was done to their brain was the same. And so it was an interesting
Wow.
kind of study to realize that like it's all perspective. But then we all of a sudden we grow up and you go, oh well, mine wasn't that bad. What are some of the things you coach some people through? And then let's get into your trauma and how you found yourself, although fit and healthy, right? You started having these health issues.
Trauma is one of those things that you have to be willing to kind of pull the layers back and go, okay, where did this really start and why do I get, because something that happens in trauma, and you're probably aware of this too, is you end up in this cycle, kind of like this merry-go-round where it's like you're good and you're doing really awesome, and then you're going around this cycle and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I'm back to where I was before. And the key thing with that is recognizing or diving deep and pulling the layers of the onion back and going, why is it that I keep getting stuck in this cycle, and then what do I do about that, and how do we heal from that? And everybody's journey is going to be different too, how they're going to heal from it, because everybody processes it different. But the first thing that we have to do is recognize the fact that it is a cycle that we're stuck in, and it could be a 2 month cycle, or it could be a 6 month cycle, it could be a 1 year, it could be a 5 year cycle, but it's a cycle. And if we don't break the cycle and we heal from that, we can't move forward. And those are the things that prevent us from moving forward and living life to our fullest potential, because we're stuck there.
Yeah, and it's so true. And so it's interesting. If somebody were to find you online right now, right, go follow you on Instagram, and you're talking about health and you're living this great life in Arizona. And to me, Arizona is very much like a cleaner, slower Los Angeles, right? Fancy people doing fancy things. And I mean that in a good way. It sounds like I'm making fun of something because I live in Pennsylvania, but I mean that in a good way. I know a lot of great people from your area. But what people don't realize is kind of how you were raised and how you grew up, and you actually grew up Amish. So talk a little bit about that. Now I shared with you when we first connected, I'm very familiar with the Amish world only from a drive by and see how they live perspective, right? Like I don't know the inner workings. I don't understand it. I may have watched one or two documentaries just to understand it, but being 30 minutes away from one of the hubs where they live, I've seen it. Talk a little bit about your experience growing up in the Amish community, and what was that like for the first, I believe it was 16 years of your life, right?
19, first
19,
19
sorry.
years of,
Yeah.
yeah. So the first 19 years of my life, that's where I grew up. And I grew up in the strictest order of the Amish community. So no electricity, no running water. It's very, very hard work. But the big thing about it is there's so much suppression and oppression that happens. So I didn't have a voice. I wasn't taught how to fight back. I was sexually abused. And all of those things led into this really, really bad relationship with myself and my body and how I viewed myself, and not taking care of myself in a healthy way. It was about shrinking my body and getting as small as I could. I mean, I remember because of the abuse that happened to me, I would literally curl myself up in a chair and try to make myself as small as I could because I didn't want anybody to see me. I didn't want to
Mm,
be seen because even though it wasn't my fault and the abuse wasn't my fault and I couldn't do anything about it, the big thing about that is within the Amish community, the women are very suppressed and they're not taught how to have a voice. And so when these things happen to them, they don't know how to fight back. They are taught to accept the things that are happening, or if it comes out and the church finds out that these things happened, well, they're going to make you feel and look like it was your fault and you had a
mm,
part of it. And so what that does to your spirit and soul is incredibly damaging, because now you're going to keep everything in because nobody believes you or nobody trusts you. And then you start having these thoughts about who you really are, and you tell yourself it was your fault. And how are you going to get yourself out of that, where you get to a place where you're going, that wasn't my fault
yeah.
and I didn't know any better?
There's so much to unpack there, right? Like obviously, number one, so sorry that you had to go through that. Like that's a terrible thing, especially it's something you're born into, right? You don't know any different. And from what I've seen is that the Amish community preaches, for lack of a better term, they preach that the outside world is the devil and what's happening
Yeah.
here is what's supposed to be happening. So how dare you complain about what's happening here, because you've been given the ultimate opportunity to live in this world. And so that's fascinating to me. So how common is sexual abuse to women inside of these communities?
Extremely common.
And so
Happens
what
all the time.
happens? So out of curiosity, do the women talk about it? Like do you guys talk about it within each other and like almost in secret, keep it away from the men, or what's that like?
I never had a conversation with another woman other than a sister of mine about it, and never talked about it until the church found out. And then you were the talk of the church, which is also incredibly damaging to your
Mm,
spirit, because you have to understand, like, this is a church community and everybody knows everybody. And so if something like that comes out, you go to church on a Sunday, all eyes are on you. And I wasn't even a member of the church, but they treated me like I was a member of the church. So whatever punishment they could put on me, that's what they did, because, well, that was a sin.
well, and that's obviously, if we were to break it down into simplest format, that's how they controlled,
Yeah.
right? That's how you keep that lineage alive and you continue to have people live that way, is out of fear and control and damnation, right? Like I don't think I've ever said that word out loud, but like you utilizing those tools to manipulate, which is so terrifying, that it's still happening to this day. Now, from the obviously, I've seen the research. I've had conversations with people in similar situations, not the same. So I can see why, but I'm asking this question from an outsider's perspective because I know this question would come up. Why would people not just leave? Like, why would you just not leave? And then we're going to get into your journey of leaving and how you left, but why wouldn't you?
The fear that they instill in you. So the way that they teach you about God is that he's first of all, they teach you that the Amish way is the only way. Like if you're born there, that's where you need to stay because that's the only way you'll get to heaven. If you don't and you disobey the church's rules and you leave, other than committing murder, leaving the community is like the biggest sin you can commit. So they teach that God's up in the sky with a iron rod ready to beat you over the head if you do something wrong. And I started to see and wonder, why would there be such a God? Because to me, that was not love. And I started to question, like, why do they treat people the way that they do? And my exact thoughts were, well, if I'm going to go to hell for dressing a certain way and disobeying their rules, then I might as well go to hell driving a car.
Wow.
I'm like, let me at least experience life a little bit. And I'm like, that's not really a healthy way to think about that, but that's how desperate I was at the moment.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, at the end of the day, if I can't even be myself within these rules and these boundaries, why not just go and explore and see what else is out there for myself, which is such a fascinating way to look at it. So at 19, you're like, I'm done. I'm out of here. Talk about that process, because it's not like you can just leave. Like, you can't just be like, hey, mom and dad, I'm out of here. See ya.
Yeah.
You know, what was that process like?
Absolutely. When I was 17, I have a twin sister and I have 18 siblings. So we come
Oh
from a
my.
really large family.
Are they
Yes.
still in the community?
4 of us left, all the rest are still at home.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So when I was 17, my twin and I ran away for 2 days. And I knew at that point in time that I was not meant to be there and I didn't want to be there. But after 2 days, she said, I can't do this. I don't want to do this to my mom. It was my dad. He died when I was 13, so he wasn't there anymore. So it was my mom with all the kids. And I felt obligated to go back because she did. And I told her the following day, I said, I'm not staying. I can't stay here. And she said, no, I can't either. She's still there and she has 10 or 11 kids.
Wow.
So, so fast forward 2 years later, I knew the entire 2 years that I could never see my future there. I did not know where I was going. I did not know how I was going to leave or what was going to happen. I just knew in my heart and soul that I didn't belong there. But I became a member of the church because that's what you did. I started dating. I had a boyfriend from New York. I lived in Ohio. And I would only see him like a couple times a year and we would write letters to each other.
Wow.
We didn't have phones, so we couldn't
Yeah.
call each other. So we had to write letters to each other. So at this point in time, when I left, I was 19. I'm working at my oldest sister's house, and it's my turn to deliver a letter to my boyfriend. So I walked to the mailbox at noon, and I opened the mailbox, and there was a note in there that was labeled to me, and it was from my boyfriend from New York, and he sent me a note and said that his sister and her boyfriend and he drove down the day before from New York. They left, they ran away. Mind you, we had never talked about leaving ever.
Wow.
So we didn't even know both didn't know we were having thoughts about it. And he said, if you want to leave, we're going to come by at 10 o'clock tonight here on this mountain, and you can come meet us here and we'll leave. If you don't want to leave, then I'll come back later on and we can talk about it. So basically that was his way of saying, if you don't leave, like, we're breaking up.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a discussion later, aka I'm gone.
Later.
So
Yep, I'm out.
So really quick, like, obviously, why did you not talk about it? Like, why was it not brought up between you and him? Was it because you didn't see each other enough? Was it because people were reading your letters? Why not? Why not be like, hey, you're my boyfriend, I feel like I need to share this with you, or hey, you're my girlfriend, I feel like I need to share this with you?
I think it was literally because we didn't see each other very much. We saw
Yeah.
each other like twice a year. And so we didn't have that much time. We had to be very careful what we put in the letters too, because parents, it's not upon them to open the letters and read them.
Right.
No
Yeah.
matter, if it's labeled to you,
Lizzie's
it's
a
delivered.
wild child. Like we got to make sure we're reading her letters just to make sure. No, I get it. Like it's
Yeah.
again, it's that control. And I'm not saying you're a wild child.
I
But
was.
yeah, well, we're here for a reason, right? And so, as we talk about this journey, so you obviously you left, right? So 10 p.m. that night, you met him on the mountain, and then you move forward. And so talk a little bit about that process and what did you guys do? Like, I mean, it says in your book you had $20 in your pocket. Like if I had $20 in my pocket, I would be scared to go to the store, let alone leave everything behind. Like what was the thought process? Was it like, hey, we have everybody or we have each other? Like what did you guys do?
I don't think we knew what we were going to do. We just knew we were getting out. I left with the $20 in my pocket, and I had the clothes that I was wearing, but I wasn't going to keep wearing those. But I had no idea where I was going to go. I just knew I was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And after we left, we went to a friend's house that had left a couple years before that. So we had some connections, and he connected me to a couple that was married from the community, had left like 5 years before, and asked them, hey, I don't know why he chose me, because there was like 5 of us that left at the same time, and he picked me to go live with them. And
Mm.
they said, yes, you can come live with us. Mind you, I did not have a social security number. I did not have a job, license, anything like that. 2 days after I left, I had a job, got a job at a local restaurant as a dishwasher.
Wow.
And they paid me under the table until I got my social security number. And the couple that I moved in with, they said, yes, you can come live with us and you can pay $50 a month on rent for a room. We'll provide food and whatever else that you need, and we're going to help you get your social security number, your driver's license, and a car. And once you have that, then you can move out. And 2 months later, I had all of it and I moved out.
That's so crazy. So in the Amish community, you guys don't have social security numbers.
Not where I'm from. There are some Amish communities that do, but where I'm from, we never had social security numbers. So I had to go figure out how to apply for that. So get this, I needed 3 forms of identification to go get my social security number. Okay, we don't have photos, we don't have driver's license or IDs. What do I need to do? I had to go find the doctor that was my mom's doctor when I was born, because I didn't have any other medical records. So I
Wow.
had to find the medical record from when I was born. I had to go to the health department and pay $25 for a birth certificate. And then I had to go home at some point and get my 8th grade education card from when I graduated. And those were the 3 things that I was able to get my social security number.
So how did you get back home to get that eighth grade report card or whatever?
Every other Sunday, the entire family went to church. And so I had to wait for a Sunday that I knew that they were going to go to church and then go home and get it.
That's so crazy. That's crazy to me. And obviously here we are and you're thriving and you're living an amazing life. Are you still with that boyfriend?
No,
No. Did he go
no.
back? What do you know what happened to him? Am I allowed to ask these questions?
You can ask that question. Everybody asks that question.
Yeah.
No, we separated a few months after we left, and I was having this conversation with someone after my book came out, and she was asking me that question too. And I said, no, we separated, and I don't really know what he's doing now. And she goes, well, he played his part. He helped you leave. And I said, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and look, everybody plays their part, you know what I mean? And we all have exes. Let's
Yep.
be honest. We all have exes and we
Yep.
all have these things, but that is such a huge role to play to say, hey, like, let's go figure this out. And it's just so crazy to try and wrap your head around. And I think during this conversation, I feel like I'm talking in circles a lot of times because it's really, really hard for me to relate. Right? Like it's hard for me to relate. So what year is this? So when you were 19, what year is it? Not to divulge your age. I just need to get a time frame of what's happening.
19, what was 19 years ago? I think it was in 2004.
Okay, so so you were born in 84?
85,
85. So
some,
you
yeah,
were okay, cool. So whatever that
something
comes
like
down
that.
to, right? So
Yeah.
when I look at that and I kind of break that down, um, the world was pretty far advanced in technology. Not like it is now, but like there were cell phones, there were all these things. What was it like to experience that for the first time? Was there a learning curve? Was there no interest in it at all? Like this is scary. Like what was your thought process?
Everything was exciting. There was a huge culture shock, and you're so sheltered when you're in the community, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm,
So when you leave, like naive is really, really high. Like you're so naive to everything around you. But I think in some ways that helped me because being naive to certain things like didn't make me overthink about what my next steps are and what I need to do. The one thing that we learned really, really well growing up where we did is hard work and discipline.
mm.
Like you say you have to do something, all right. You don't question it. You don't go, all right, let me go like watch a show or a movie because I don't feel like doing it. No, you just do it. And so that discipline and follow through was a huge part of it. But it was like I had never had a shower. Like we
What?
took baths, but like never had a shower until after I left.
That's crazy. Like
Yeah.
those are things I don't think about, right? Like obviously I know that they don't have cars, they don't have electricity, they don't have televisions, whatever else comes along with it. Now I don't know in your sect, but I've also seen that people find shortcuts, right? Like
Mhm.
a lot of the Amish communities in Lancaster, they build furniture and they do those types of things, and they miraculously have websites. Well, how do you have a website if that you're not allowed to have a website? And I used to be in medical sales, and we would service this one doctor who would service people in the community, and she's like, oh yeah, if they need a CPAP they would just have a generator which would create
Yeah.
electricity to the, like there's always like these loopholes that if it serves us it's good, but if it's against the narrative then it's bad. And it's such an
Yeah.
interesting thing. So how was that reprogramming for you, and how did you work through that trauma for yourself to bring it back around to trauma?
Yeah, the sects that you're talking about are different. Those are like higher level in the community. So where I'm
Mm-hmm.
from, like we were never allowed to do that.
Wow.
We if we needed to use a phone, we had to go to the neighbors to use a phone. We weren't allowed to take a driver to go somewhere, which where you're from and the Amish around you, I'm sure they use the 15 passenger van, so I'll get in and go somewhere.
I've seen it
uh,
from time to time. I mean, we got the horse and buggies too. Like,
yeah,
got
they
to
do.
drive around them. Yep.
Yeah, 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 they do, but it takes a long time, and like I mentioned before, the naiveness, like someone asked me one time like how did you even move forward from all that? And I said, to be honest, oblivion. Because
Mm,
you're so oblivious to the things that really like the reality of the world and all the things that come with it because you were so sheltered, but you just did. You just didn't question all things, and a lot of times that's not a good thing either because you'll get in trouble because you don't understand certain things. So working through that, I got to a place after a few years where I remember how I said like I would hide myself at home and
mm-hmm,
try to like make myself smaller. Well, I after a few years of being out and realizing how much I don't know, I started doing the same thing. I started being like,
mm,
oh wow, like people are gonna think I'm not smart enough or I don't understand what they're talking about. So I would start pretending like I would know more than what I did. And then I would start hiding again and make myself smaller because I didn't want people to know the real me and where I was from.
yeah. That's so interesting. So did you seek out a therapist? Did you seek out somebody to help you through this? Because this is a massive transition in life that could literally,
Mm.
that's why a lot of people leave and then go back, right?
Yeah.
Because there is this great obliviousness to life and a fear when you have to approach something so new and so over. I mean, imagine overstimulating in so many ways, right? Like
Yeah.
everything just coming at you so quickly. So what did you do to kind of cope and kind of nurture yourself through that moment?
A very common thing that happens with the people that leave is they kind of surround themselves with all the other people that have left. And I started to see that that's what was happening. And I didn't want to do that anymore because I felt like something in me was saying, you need to go and surround yourself with people that are not a part of the community, because they have done life differently and they know things that you don't know, and I wanted to learn about it. So what I did is I started to kind of separate myself from just the people that left, and I started getting close to people that were not from the community, and they had the high school experience, the college experience. They grew up in a completely different environment and household, and they were able to teach me things. It was incredibly uncomfortable.
I bet.
And that's where I did a little bit of my hiding. But after a few years, I started to realize, like, this is what's going to help me grow. And I didn't seek out a therapist back then. It took me a long time. I did a lot of personal development. I would read books and listen to people, and I had a lot of really, really good people on the side of me where I would lean into. But it wasn't until I never had a life coach or anybody like that in my life until about 2020.
Yeah.
And in 2020 is when I started to realize I still had a lot of unresolved things that I needed to heal from. And it's just been crazy to watch and get to know myself internally, like in a different way that I didn't even know was possible.
Yeah, that's huge. And just shout out to people listening. Like, we all have internal traumas that we haven't worked through. Like, there are things bubbling inside of us that we don't even know it's there. So I highly recommend searching that out, right? Like, it's like the women who you work with to help them, get healthier. Like, you're pulling traumas out of them that they didn't even know existed. They just thought, oh, it's because I ate too many donuts. No, there's so much more to that process, right? There's so much more to unlocking, like, well, why am I doing these things, right? Why am I having these experiences? And so, it's obviously a very uncomfortable conversation, but a necessary one. And so to hear that you went through this is why you're the perfect person to serve these women, right? And to do it at such a high level. So I want to ask you a question that I ask, every single guest on my show. It is a two-part question. The first part is, what is your definition of success? And the second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day now to ensure that success for yourself?
Absolutely. Someone asked me a very, very good question yesterday, and they asked me, what is the most proudest moment in your business? And I feel like that aligns with what's the definition of success. And I told her, and she's like, oh, it's like, I haven't thought about that in a long time. And she goes, you can think about it for a while. And I said, I don't have to. Because my mission is to help other people become healthy and get a lifestyle in place where is sustainable for them, where they can feel good and become the strongest version of themselves. And so my definition of success is being able to teach other people, like, how they can take care of their health and how that reflects everything else in their life, their confidence, how they feel about themselves, how strong they are. I had a client tell me yesterday, I've never felt this strong in my life before, and it had nothing to do with working out in the gym. It was about her internal strength. So my definition of success is when people get to that place where they don't even recognize who they were 3 months ago, because they've become this new person.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And so what are 3 things you do every day to ensure that success for yourself?
For myself, it is what I put into my body, what I'm fueling into my body to nourish and nurture myself, because that reflects how we feel, how we sleep, how confident we are, all of those things. That's one. And number 2 is how I speak to myself as well, paying attention to my thoughts and what I'm telling myself on a daily basis, because we're either tearing ourselves down or we're building ourselves up. And so if I can pay attention to that, and one of the ways that I do that is listen to really, really good podcasts of people that I get to that are really, really uplifting, and I can just tune into the psychology of things as well. And then also what I'm really passionate about, the health field of things. That's part of it as well. And then the other part is how I take care of my son and being there for my son, because that's a huge part of my life as well.
Let me ask you about that for a moment, right? Obviously, parenting is a crazy thing. I don't have kids of my own, but I have 2 bonus kids, and I learn every day, and I make mistakes every day. And I think I do some good things once in a while. But it's the greatest teacher of mine to be in that role. So growing up the way that you grew up, and the way you were raised by your parents, what lessons are you learning now in the role of parent, that you're like, I know that I'm doing it right because?
Allowing my child to have a voice. The biggest thing that I've heard people say about Amish kids is, I want my kids to behave like Amish kids. They can take their kids, 3 to 4 year olds, to a church 3 hour church service, and they don't make a peep. And they're
Wow.
like, oh, I want my kids to behave like that. And I say, no, you don't, because that's suppression, and they don't have a voice. And so my son is very strong-willed, and he teaches me a lot of things. But the biggest thing that I have learned, and what it's teaching me, is allowing him to have that voice and not suppressing that, because that's what's going to build his confidence and, build him into the strong person that he needs to be. And
Yeah.
so when your kids have a voice, don't tell them to not have a voice. Allow them to express themselves. That's my biggest thing is, and then letting him explore, like not being afraid, like that helicopter parent where it's like, oh, don't do that, you're gonna get hurt. Like, no, like the way we learn is when we make mistakes, right? And when we get hurt, that's how we learn. And so that's how your kids are gonna learn too. Obviously, you're not gonna go let them like cook a full meal and like just burn themselves in the
I wish they
entire
would cook a
body,
full
but
meal. Cook me a full meal. How's that sound? Right. So, but I love that. And it's so the idea of like, hey, I never had a voice. I want you to have a voice. Right. And like, what does that mean? And how do we kind of dissect that and go through that? So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question, but before we get there, let's get to the important stuff. How do people get a hold of you? How do they follow you? How do they work with you? What's all the good stuff?
absolutely. My Instagram handle is Lizzie Ends Wellness. You can find me on there, and anybody that wants to work with me, you can go into my bio, find a link to book a free consultation with me. If that's the route that you want to go. I also have my website, lizzyenz.com, is where you can buy my book as well, Escaping My Reflection.
Awesome. This conversation has been absolutely amazing. And like I said, I wrap up every single conversation with the same question. And that is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
My biggest moment of growth is when I allow myself to go in here into my heart and get to know me better.
I love it. Lizzie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your incredible story with my audience, and, continue to make an impact in the world, not only in the health space, but also in the idea that we can have a voice and we can speak out and we can take control of our own lives, even if we come from a certain place. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.